It's not possible to start our stay in our summer home on Lake of the Woods until after the ice melts off the lake. This can happen anytime from the end of March until late May, depending on the weather conditions. The spring of 2004 saw a thick ice cover on the lake, but warm weather when it came melted it quickly so that by the 1st of May, the lake was navigable. We left Bloomington in early May, and by the evening of the 10th, we were as far as Fort Frances and Rainy Lake, right on the U.S.-Canada border. This picture is taken from Canada looking across to the U.S. As you can see, it was a lovely day, a bit cool but quite seasonable for the north. The weather forecast for our morning trip to Kenora was for snow and cold. We decided to get an early start and to get to Kenora and then take things from there. The early morning of May 11th brought a few flurries to Fort Frances, but nothing to stop us from going on to the cabin. The farther north we went, the harder the snow came down. A few miles outside of Kenora, it was snowing in earnest, and had been for some time. We saw the first May snowplower of our lives, and were glad they hadn't retired him for the summer. We have passed the sign you see many times, but this time the promise of adventure took on a special meaning for us. The people at K Sports were expecting us to pick up Big Boat at their docks, so we went there first and found that the boat was in the water ready for us. Well, as you can see, kind of ready. There was a big snow removal job to be done, and it was still coming down hard. After a brief consultation, we decided to spring for a night in the inn. When we went inside to say that we would be back the next day, Big Al just smiled and offered to take us out in the snow machine. It looks a little cozier than the last picture, doesn't it? We were warm and comfortable, and we agreed that it was one of our better moves. By the time the snow ended the next morning, more than a foot had fallen, a record for May. The Trans-Canada Highway was blocked for quite a while, and spring was put on hold. Local businesses had to call their snow removal people back into action. I like to think that after 50 years, I can find my way to the island in almost any conditions. This picture is taken out of our window at the inn looking across to Coney Island. It really shows about how far one could see in that snow. It serves to remind me that whenever I wonder whether I could have found my way, that it would have been ludicrous to try. We were content to watch the cars slide around the parking lot and see if, during one of those brief periods when it didn't snow quite so hard, whether we could make out Coney Island or not. We decided to hold on to our room until checkout time, 11 a.m. the next day, hoping that the snow would end and we could get out to the island. With our wood stove and Mr. Heater, we knew we could keep warm. The snow had stopped by the morning of May 12th, and following our plan, we decided we could go out. Although this picture is taken earlier, it does show the kind of job ahead of us before we could even load the boat. Most of the snow had to be removed. Past experience taught us to take warm jackets for arriving in May, but I never thought I would need gloves. Well, I didn't have gloves, so I worked with bare hands. I will have gloves in the future. I got the job done, but my hands could feel it for days to come. The docks were slippery, so we had to watch our step. By mid-afternoon, all was ready, and we made our way out to the cabin through a winter wonderland. The snow was very wet and heavy, and since the temperature was a couple of degrees above freezing, the snow was melting. Anne had her wellies with her. She also had gloves, but we had to purchase boots for me before we left town. I will leave it to you to conclude whether Anne is smarter than I am in some respects. Our cabin sits anywhere from 2 to 4 feet off the ground, so we have a lot of porches and decks, all of which were covered with snow. We had a boatload of stuff to bring up the hill. As you can see in this picture, we cleared a way around the front door to facilitate the transfer. This shows our cabin from the back. It was the first time that we had seen it snow-covered. We'd been to A-Rene just after Christmas, back around 1967, but that was before the cabin you see was built. There were other times in May or September where we had had an inch or so, but never a covering like this. It wasn't until later in the summer that we fully insulated our dining room, which you see in this picture. At that time, it was heated only indirectly from the wood stove in the living room. We do have a very efficient portable propane heater that we use when we wanted that room a bit warmer. Here I am shoveling down by our floating dock and pump house. That dock is the closest one to the cabin, making it best for unloading. Note the 2 pails in the foreground. Our water system is always shut down when we arrive, so we get pails of water out of the lake until we can get it running. We took our time this year since our water lines are susceptible to freezing, a very real possibility this year. The shovel I'm using, notice the gloves, has an interesting history. We don't have a proper snow shovel at the lake. Why should we? We never are there to shovel snow. The shovels we use are for digging with pointy curved blades, not at all good for snow. Although it is not an ordinary snow shovel, what you see has a flat blade. It came from my parental home, where it was one of those used to shovel coal from the bin into our furnace. When the Johnson house was converted to gas heat, the shovel became redundant. Those of you with backgrounds similar to mine know that there's an unwritten rule in every Scandinavian household that you never get rid of anything unless you're absolutely positively sure you will never have to use it again. In the early days, our two-wheel trailer contained any number of items that if they would ever be useful again, it would be at the lake. I am sure there are a number of inadvertent antiques stored at the lake. The shovel was such an item. It hung for years in the woodshed, unused until May 2004. One should never make fun of old family traditions. Can you find the skylights on the workshop? They're not letting in very much light. The previous fall we had constructed a deer fence. Here you can see part of it acting as a snow fence. Here is another part of the fence looking from the outside into the garden. This picture shows the garden under snow. We asked whether the deer fence had held over the winter, or did the deer get in and feast on the shrubs. Unfortunately, there were several breaches in the fence. One advantage to the snow cover was that we could see the deer tracks clearly and determine just where they were getting in, and which parts of the fence needed to be strengthened. It took several days for all the snow to melt, but several clear spots soon appeared in the garden. To our delight, a bunch of miniature daffodils emerged blooming from underneath the snow. There were all kinds of birds visiting these clear spots, looking for the food they expected to find in abundance in a normal May. The snow is gone and some perennials are starting to grow. There's a lot of cleaning up to do, but we have been back to town and visited the nursery for some new plants, as you can see. Also notice that the deciduous trees and bush have not leafed out at all yet. The skylights are clear, the deer fence is repaired, and the place is showing signs of being opened up. Looking out over the lake, one can see that it is very early spring yet. Although the leaves finally did come out, it was a very cool summer. In fact, to the natives, it seemed like summer never came at all. They were not very happy about that. So we end our tale with a picture of our living room with fire blazing. We burned a lot of wood the summer of 2004, particularly in May, but we were always cozy inside. There is much more to tell about that summer, but the record snow of May 11th and the adventure promised by the Kenora sign is something we will never forget.